I'm Claire Benton, 70 years old, a retired hospital CFO who still keeps her numbers straight and her boundaries tighter. Last month, I decided to celebrate my 70th birthday the way I wanted by renting a beautiful beach house on Cape May. I paid every bill myself. The idea was simple: family, ocean air, peace. What I got was something else entirely. When I came back from the pool that afternoon, still dripping from my swim, I heard my daughter-in-law through the open window. Her name is Sloane Avery, 34, polished and sharp enough to cut glass. She laughed and said to my son, "Michael, we're all couples, so we get the master. Your mom can sleep on the floor." I stood outside, towel in hand, feeling the sting behind her words. My own son chuckled along, too spineless to stop her. That was the moment I stopped being the polite widow, trying to please everyone. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, texted a single word to the movers waiting outside the gate. Now, by the time Sloane finished her drink upstairs, her luggage was already being rolled out of my master's suite. I paid for this house. I own this weekend, and I'm done sleeping on anyone's floor. By the time Michael came downstairs, the movers were already closing the truck doors. Sloane's voice sharpened when she saw the empty hallway leading to the master suite. I stood by the kitchen island, calm as the tide. The rental contract, the insurance, every receipt all bore my name. Claire Benton. I told them both, gently but clearly, that anyone staying under my roof would do so with respect. If that was too much to ask, the beach had plenty of motels. Sloane called it overreacting. Michael called it unnecessary drama. Maybe they were right. Maybe a 70-year-old woman shouldn't draw battle lines over a bedroom. Or maybe that's exactly when you must. What do you think? Is reclaiming your space selfish, or the only way to remind people that kindness still deserves boundaries? Dinner that night was a performance, and Sloane made herself the star. She floated around the dining room like a hostess on a magazine cover, pouring wine I had ordered, serving food I had paid for, and thanking everyone for helping us plan this weekend for Claire. I sat at the head of the table, silent, letting her play her part. Michael smiled too brightly, eager to pretend nothing was wrong. When Sloane raised her glass to toast family and new beginnings, I noticed the flicker of confusion on Michael's face. He wasn't sure what she meant, and that uncertainty was all I needed. I turned slightly toward the doorway as Paula Green entered. My attorney had arrived precisely on time, calm and professional, carrying her briefcase. Sloane's smile faltered. Paula greeted me politely and laid the rental agreement on the table. She explained, to everyone present, that all financial responsibility and property rights for the weekend belong to me. No shared accounts. No co-signers. No misunderstandings. The air thickened as the mover's headlights flashed outside the window, still idling by the gate. Sloane's glass trembled slightly in her manicured hand. I stayed seated, quiet and gracious. Let her keep calling herself the hostess. The paperwork said otherwise. Paula Green stood beside me, her voice calm but unyielding as she reviewed the contract clause by clause. The master suite, she clarified, was listed under my exclusive occupancy. Any guest attempting to reassign rooms without my consent could be relocated or removed. It was legal language, but in that moment, it felt like poetry. Sloane tried to laugh it off, insisting we were overcomplicating things. I let her speak until Paula unfolded the receipt's rental deposit, catering order, floral service, total of $3,000 all charged to my card. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing for the first time how little he knew about the weekend he thought his wife had organized. Outside, The movers stepped onto the porch, waiting for instruction. Paula's eyes met mine, and I nodded once. Within minutes, Sloane's designer luggage was wheeled toward the truck, her disbelief echoing through the glass doors. I reminded them both that respect was part of the rental agreement, too. If Sloane and Michael preferred, there was a charming bed and breakfast 2 blocks away, booked and prepaid in their names. Sloane's face flushed as she demanded to know why. I told her simply that guests who insult the host don't stay in the master bedroom. The balance of power had shifted, quietly and completely. I didn't have to raise my voice or make a scene. The papers, the receipts, and the truth did it for me. Sloane tried to recover her charm, pouring another glass of wine and pretending the tension wasn't choking the room. Paula, patient but methodical, slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were the transfers, every so-called emergency payment I had made to help Michael and Sloane over the past year. 21 transactions, totaling nearly $70,000, each labeled as something different: mortgage gap, medical bill, cas repère, work conference. Paula's analysis was clear: 70% of those funds never went where they were supposed to. They were redirected to personal accounts, boutique stores, and a private loan payoff in Sloane's name. Michael looked as if the air had been pulled out of him. I didn't say a word. I wanted him to see the pattern, to understand how easy it is to lose sight of respect when you stop asking questions. Sloane insisted it was a misunderstanding, a mix-up between cards, a bookkeeping issue. Paula smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from hearing the same excuse too many times. The receipts were undeniable. Every dollar had a trail, and that trail led straight to her. Still, I stayed quiet. The silence did more damage than shouting ever could. I could feel Sloane unraveling, her voice rising as Michael's confidence sank. If you were me, would you have ended the evening there? Or would you have kept going until every lie was accounted for? Paula wasn't finished. She opened another envelope, one I had asked her to verify before the weekend began. Inside were printed messages, screenshots pulled from Sloane's secondary phone line. They weren't between her and a friend or a client, but between her and Trent Wallace, Michael's direct supervisor at the fintech firm. The tone of the messages left no room for interpretation. There were photos, hotel confirmations, and one particular text from Trent that made Michael's face go pale. Push your husband to keep his mother quiet. It said, if he plays along, I'll fast-track his promotion. The room went completely still. The only sound was the ocean outside and Sloane's shaky breath. She tried to snatch the papers, insisting they were fake. But Paula had already cross-checked the timestamps with Trent's corporate email activity. The dates matched perfectly. Michael sank back in his chair, staring at the proof of how deep the manipulation ran. His wife hadn't just used him, she had weaponized his career. I didn't raise my voice or offer sympathy. I simply told Paula to forward the entire exchange to human resources. Anonymously, some betrayals deserve daylight. Outside, the surf crashed against the shore, steady and cold. For the first time all evening, Sloane didn't have a single word left. The knock came just as Paula gathered her files. When I opened the door, a man stood there holding a small external drive and an envelope with my name neatly written across it. He introduced himself as Caleb Avery, Sloane's younger brother. His voice carried the kind of exhaustion that only truth can bring. He said he'd driven 3 hours after learning I might finally see what his sister had done to other families. Paula confirmed his ID, and I invited him in. Michael looked stunned. Sloane went rigid. Caleb placed the drive on the table. It contained emails, payment logs, and photos from years earlier, proof of the same manipulation pattern. Sloane had targeted widowed families before, always through men who could be steered by sympathy and money. Caleb admitted she'd cut him off years ago, spreading rumors about his instability to keep him silent. As he spoke, the picture sharpened Sloane's charm was method, not personality. Each victim had been chosen, studied, and drained. Caleb's voice cracked when he said he couldn't stop her before, but he could now. The silence afterward was heavy. Michael couldn't look at his wife, and for the first time that night, Sloane's mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Caleb's evidence settled the room into uneasy quiet. I took that moment to unlock my phone and play a short audio clip. The sound of the ocean hummed beneath Sloane's voice, bright and cruel. "Your mother's just a lonely old widow," she said. "She can sleep on the floor." The words hung in the air, thin and cold as glass. Michael's shoulders slumped. He finally heard what I had heard. Sloane muttered that it was a joke, that I was twisting her tone. But Paula opened another document, an email from Sloane to an insurance contact, asking about changing the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. The message was phrased casually, as if she were helping me manage paperwork. The date was 2 weeks ago. When Paula read it aloud, even Sloane's charm couldn't find footing. The insurance officer had flagged the request as suspicious and frozen it, pending verification. Sloane tried to claim it was for my convenience. I didn't need to argue. The proof spoke louder than anger. I turned to Michael and said quietly that manipulation often hides behind concern. He didn't defend her this time. His silence was its own confession. And for Sloane, it was the moment her story stopped sounding like control and started sounding like crime. The call came just after midnight, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the beach house. Detective Sarah Morrison introduced herself from the Connecticut State Police. Her tone was steady, professional, but carried the weight of something larger. She explained they were investigating financial irregularities linked to Sloane Avery cases involving multiple elderly victims, all with the same pattern of forged assistance and altered insurance forms. Paula spoke with the detective while I listened. The department wanted copies of every document and the audio recording. They also asked that Sloane remain available for questioning. Outside, the movers were finishing their work, quietly loading the last of her things into the van. Michael stood beside me, hollow-eyed but resolute. He whispered that he would handle his part and face whatever came next. I believed him. For the first time in years, my son looked like a man standing on his own feet. By dawn, the house was still again. The storm had moved from the sky into the truth. By morning, the tide had turned in every way that mattered. Human resources at the fintech firm confirmed that Trent Wallace had been placed on leave pending an internal ethics review. The evidence Paula sent anonymously had started an inquiry of its own. Sloane's access to Michael's accounts was suspended, her credit cards frozen, and the insurance company requested a formal statement from me. Michael sat across from me at breakfast, but determined. He admitted he had ignored too many warning signs and said he would repay every dollar I'd given, even if it took years. I told him I didn't need repayment, I needed boundaries. He agreed without argument. Later that day, Paula drew up a separation plan to protect my assets and limit further contact. There were no shouting matches, no dramatics, just signatures, papers, and an understanding that decency has to be defended. The house grew quiet again that evening. The sea outside was calm, its rhythm steady. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I had drawn my line and held it. And in that stillness, I realized revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it sounds like a door closing softly and finally staying shut. By the end of the week, every consequence had found its place. Trent Wallace resigned before the company could fire him, his wife filing for separation the same day. Sloan Avery was charged with financial misconduct and insurance fraud after the detective connected her pattern across 2 states. Caleb agreed to testify, not out of revenge, but relief. Michael moved into a small apartment near his office, keeping his distance while rebuilding his own footing. He visited me on weekends, no longer out of guilt, but respect. Paula closed the last of the legal filings, and the beach house key returned to my hand. On Sunday morning, I swam again at sunrise. The sea was cold, the air clean. As the light broke across the water, I realized justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes, it's just the sound of waves erasing footprints that never deserved to stay. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.